kulanti waxaan u xiisaray dhamaantiin baakhyaarta hawada naga daawanaysa daawada ku soo dhawaada barnaamij gaar ah oo ka hadlaya maalmihii adkaa ee loo soo maray halganka qarannimada madaxbanaanida Somaliland. munaasibadan ayaa ka dhacday magaalada Cardiff ee gobolka Wales, halkaas oo ay soo qaban qaabiyeen jahaliyadaha Somaliland ee ku dhaqan gobolka Wales oo uu hogaaminayo aqoon-yahan Ciid Cali Salaan. munaasibadan ayaa lagu xusay maalmihii UFO sidoo kale dhagax tuurkii ka bilaabmay gobolada Somaliland waqtigii uu haystay gumaystihii madooba ee Syed Ibrahim. kulankan ayaa sidoo kale waxa ka soo qayb galay MBA ka socda dalka boqortooyada Ingiriiska gaar ahaan gobolka Wales, sidoo kale siyaasiyiin iyadoo bulsho badan oo reer Somaliland oo isugu jira aqoon-yahano, cuqaal, siyaasiyiin iyo haween intaba ay ka soo qayb galeen. munaasibadan ayaa waxay ahayd mid lagu xusay isla markaana lagu xasuusinay shacabka Jamhuuriyadda Somaliland maalmihii adkaa ee loo soo maray qarannimada madaxbanaanida Somaliland ee ay maanta harsanayaan malaayiinka reer Somaliland. kulankan ayaa sidoo kalena waxaa lagaga hadlay qadiyada madaxbanaanida Somaliland, sidoo kale kaalinta dalka boqortooyada Ingiriiska uu ka qaadan karo sidii ay Somaliland u heli lahayd madaxbanaanideeda ay ka heshay dalka boqortooyada Ingiriiska 1960 iyadoo khudbadaha badankooda lagaga hadlay horumarka dhinac walba ee ka jira dhinaca dimuqraadiyadda haday tahay dhinaca nolosha bini'aadanimo ee ka taagan dalka Jamhuuriyadda Somaliland. munaasibadan ayaa waxa ay kaga duwaneed munaasabadii hore. waxaa hadlay dhalinyaro waqtiga dhagax tuurkii goobjoog ahaa oo ay dowladii Syed Ibrahim ay xabsiyada dhigtay, taasoo ay si hufan oo waafiya ay uga hadleen maalmihii adkaa ee ay soo mareen. kulankan khudbadihiisa oo ku baxay luqadda Ingiriiska ayaa wuxuu ahaa mid si weyn loogu lafaguray qadiyada madaxbanaanida Somaliland, iyadoo oo ay siyaasiyiintii ka socday gobolka Wales ee dalka boqortooyada Ingiriisku ay si weyn ugu nuuxnuuxsadeen qarannimada Somaliland iyo sida ay aqoonta dheer ay ugu leeyihiin shacabka iyo dalka Jamhuuriyadda Somaliland. haddaba waxaa noo kala baxaya kulanka ballaaran ee ka dhacay magaalada Cardiff ee gobolka Wales, halkaas oo ay jahaliyadaha Somaliland ay ku soo bandhigeen barnaamij aad u qiimo badan oo ka hadlaya taariikhda madaxbanaanida dalka Jamhuuriyadda Somaliland sida iyo daawasho waxa dhamaantiinba.
Attending this evening's event, my name is Mohammed Adan and I'm honored to be chairing this prestigious past, present and future of Somaliland event here in the Temple of Peace, Cardiff. And we have some key figures here with us today, and the list of today's guests are as follows: South Wales Police and Crime Commissioner Alan Michael, Cardiff and South Penarth MP Stephen Dalty, Leader of Cardiff Council Hugh Thomas, Bhutan Labour Councillor Syed Ibrahim, Chief Constable at South Wales Police Matt Jukes, Chief Reporter from Western Mail Martin Shipton, and Catay's Labour Councillor Ali Ahmed. Okay, so we have a packed agenda to follow today, so we'll begin with some opening remarks from the Bhutan Councillor Syed Ibrahim.
Thank you, Mohammed, for introducing the event. Just would like to say thank you to everybody and thank you for the organisers for organising this event. My name is Syed Ibrahim and I'm a councillor for Bhutan. I've been as a councillor now for 16 months, and since being elected it's been a pleasure and enjoyable moments at times, but hard work. It's not easy. As a young came to Cardiff at a young age from Somaliland. There is and has been quite a long journey of Somalilanders in Cardiff. History goes back to late 1800s, and I think the history of Cardiff says itself. There's one thing that I could say when I spoke to some of the organisers in the beginning of this event, and one of the things that I've enjoyed was to kind of capture the journey and the times that Somaliland has come through, going back into 1984 when there was kind of educated myself in a way where I didn't know anything about the stone throwing events, and you know, the people that got arrested at the time were people who were the cream, and the people who kind of were the leaders of the country at that time. And I think it's important to capture every nation's history and also celebrate it to a level where we pass history back to the young people, because there has been on many occasions a number of times where the people of Somaliland have struggled in different ways, but I think on this occasion, I think we are here to celebrate on an occasion where in a time when the struggle has developed. And I think, you know, before I got elected, I've always been a community activist, and I've always wanted to better where I lived and where I still live, and also the people around me, regardless of where they're from. You know, and there's a large Somaliland community in my ward, and, you know, seeing them campaign regularly, raising money on a regular occasions to better their family members or their constituencies back home is always pleasing to hear. And as an elected councillor, my vision to look at how we move forward with the rest of the population of Cardiff and be proud as Somalilanders. And some of the things that I've done in the 16 months that I've been is to look at some of the positives, and also how we could look at some of the negatives that we've kind of as a community that we do need to challenge collectively. And I know there are a number of stakeholders here who kind of have helped me through to look at how we could get certain pressures through, certain motions through, certain agendas changed. And we can only do that by being positive. And I think the key to the future is to be positive and to keep working hard as a community, and to work with our other community members collectively, because if we don't hold hand to hand, I think we'll be struggling for a long time. I just want to say thank you very much for the organisers for inviting me to this event, and I'm looking forward to working with you in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Ibrahim. Next, I'll be introducing Dr. Peter Mackey, who will be discussing the resilience of Somaliland informal economy workers during and after conflict and the challenges and opportunities of today.
You can spot the lecturer who is utterly dependent on slides in order to give a public talk. We will get there if we don't have a login. Perhaps I'll start the introductions whilst we wait. Firstly, Noswitha, good evening. Diolch yn fawr, Madsanidin. Did I get it? Madsanidin, for the invitation to come speak. I am clearly not a Somalilander, but I do consider myself an honorary Somalilander, having spent a significant amount of time in Hargeisa and in parts of Hargeisa that many locals haven't spent time in Wahen Market and others, Gowanimo. So I'm very familiar with Hargeisa. I've had many a conversation with taxi drivers around here about the ins and outs of those markets in Hargeisa. So I do feel an incredible affinity to Hargeisa and to Somaliland. So I really am grateful for the invitation to come and speak. I am an academic, so I am going to talk about research. And the project that I'm going to talk about is focused on the informal economy. That's my specialism. I understand the informal economy. But a lay audience would have no interest in the informal economy. What I'll do in my discussion is talk about people's resilience during a period of intense conflict, and that experience of resilience and the importance of that resilience and self-help in the process of economic development after conflict. And I draw on research undertaken in Hargeisa, and we were focusing on urban informal economies. But it's part of a much wider project. So we were looking at Hargeisa in Somaliland, but also further afield, we were looking in Nepal, in Kathmandu, in Colombia, in Egypt, and in northern Iraq, in Kurdistan. So it was a comparative project, and I'll at times just draw out what was significant and really quite different about the experience in Somaliland, where we think there's international lessons to be drawn. Yeah. We think the experience in Hargeisa offers a pretty unique experience of self-help. What happened when the United Nations wasn't there to help, or when the help of the United Nations was actually rejected and peace was achieved through the elders? Do we have, it looks like we may slowly be getting a PowerPoint. Okay. So that's some way of introduction. I should say this isn't me. I didn't do the project on my own. I had wonderful help from Eid Ali Ahmed here, who is my Somaliland hero. But also Professor Alison Brown, Mohammed Badawani from Sonsaf in Hargeisa, and Dr. Syed, who's president of Golis University. So it was a truly collaborative effort. And the research is based on, could somebody bring up the slides as well, is that okay? The research is based on interviews with around 200 people. 200 people. 50 of those people had experienced the conflict and could reflect on what had happened, their experiences during that time and afterwards. So that's what I'm going to do, is reflect on some of those key findings. I had so many lovely pictures for you as well. It wasn't all going to be text. I'm going to keep ploughing on anyway. So let's talk about the context, which lots of you will be far more aware of than I am. And it's a harrowing experience to be told and to learn about from the mouths of people that experienced it. And the quote that stands out the most, if we're to talk about the context, was the words of General Said in Kill All But the Crows. Yep, those words, I think, sum up all we need to know about the conflict and its devastating impacts. In none of the other countries or cities that we were talking about, yes, look at how good those slides are. See, they were worth waiting for. Okay, we're going to get there. Where's the arrow? How do I move it forward? There we go. Yes, we're good. Don't touch anything in case it turns off again. Right, so that's the standout words. Kill the crows, the devastation that was experienced. And what we're looking at is what happens in the absence of UN support when people try to self-solve and manage in those conditions. So, when that's the context, when planes take off in the local airport and the bombs land on the city in which they've taken off from, it's utter devastation. And so inevitably the economy suffers. And we talk about three things. People talked about three things. I have nobody to sell to. I have no market because people have fled. We have a lack of security. Those that have remained are suffering these sorts of incredible challenges in terms of their security and the security of their businesses. And then the utter devastation of infrastructure. And you can see that in the architecture in Hargeisa, that so little remains for historically. So what happened? We've had the conflict, we've had the devastation. And these are the stories that we're able to bring out from people. Replacement services. The resilience of people who, in the absence of government provision or UN provision, people provided those basics. So the informal economy provided, so whether it's food, water, electricity, transport. And I reflect on perhaps the best example, and this is one that we really hold up and shine a light on, is Havayoko, which still exists as an NGO out in Somaliland, where, following the conflict, they were brought in from the conflict, these young workers, to come and tidy up the streets, to build back the infrastructure, lay down arms, build the infrastructure, and take small amounts of money from the local community. That was self-help. That wasn't a UN spend. That wasn't a UN program or project. That was local young people delivering the needed services. That enabled the sort of peace that emerged and the economic development that emerged afterwards. Community solidarity and trust. So we talk about money transfer systems being used, franco valuta, of which some colleagues in the room were probably involved in moving goods and money over borders in order to survive post-conflict. The gender roles. Now we know that conflict disrupts gender norms. We've seen that in post-World War II in the UK. But we saw it in a prolific way in Somaliland, the way that the conflict disrupted previous gender roles. where women came into the workforce and played a really important role in post-conflict recovery. And I'll give you one really, really good example. So we talked to people that had made the journey from Hargeisa into Ethiopia, into the camps. Men were fighting women in the camps, and some of the women in the camps that had been in the camps told us of their stories of taking the UN rations, and this is what happened, this was the impact of the conflict, taking the UN rations, which were awful, repackaging them, adding bits and bobs to make them something really quite palatable, and then selling them to the passing nomads. That is the entrepreneurial spirit of the Somalilanders that we picked up on, and that was a real change in the gender roles, because when women then returned to Hargeisa, we see women taking up roles in a way that we didn't see in many other countries, particularly conservative Muslim countries. It was a really, really interesting and important finding. It's not all positive and rosy in terms of the economy. We did see the emergence of some what we might call war economies or conflict economies. And perhaps the most significant here is the cat economy that really grew during and after the conflict. And it's something that we've dealt with locally in Cardiff too. And I'll reflect a bit on that in a minute too. Right, so how many of these kind of positive disruptions lasted? So the informal economy, people working without necessarily legal permits, without necessarily being registered, but also without social security protections and employment protections, continues to be a major part of the Somaliland economy. We're talking about around 70% or more of the economy. In some ways, you could say the informal economy is the economy. And yet, when we visited last, when we first visited, the informal economy wasn't being talked about by those that were seeking to plan for the country's future or the city's future. And yet, that's where people are working, that's where the economy is. And actually, Eid will talk a little bit later about what's happening now as a consequence of the research, where these people, this 70% of the population, their contributions are being recognised and valued. So the informal economy is still playing this really important role today. In terms of solidarity, so we talked in terms of the conflict, the way in which it created this solidarity, the sharing economy and other things. And this is where the comparative research is really important, because Hargeisa stands out in such a significant way from the other cities we visited in the low levels of harassment that we see of informal economy workers. And it's characteristic of the society that we've experienced and we're seeing in Hargeisa. We don't have harassment of folk working on the streets like you would have in most of the Latin American cities, or in Karachi in Pakistan, for instance. And then there's this trust amongst the local population, amongst the urban population. And people say to me, Pete, how did you manage going to Hargeisa? Wasn't it terrifying? And this is the photo I always pull out. So you can see here, this photo. Right? That's a pile of cash on the street. Go stick that outside this building at my university. How long do you think it will stay there? Yeah? This trust, this understanding, the person exchanging that money could go to the toilet and come back and not worry that was gone. Yeah? Trust. Now, whether that's a result of the conflict or whether that existed before, I don't know, but it's there. Okay? Nearly there, don't worry. Right, lasting gender impacts. We talked about this really important disruption to gender roles, and it really is significant. That's lasted, so women continue to play a key role in the workforce, but we do have to recognise when we look at the statistics from our work, they appear to be more vulnerable than men in the workforce, in terms of literacy levels, incomes, etc. So it's an area that we would want, if we're looking to intervene now, today, an area that we would want to do something. Very nearly there. And as I mentioned, we had the emergence of what we call war economies, or the cat economy. It's a really big contemporary problem in Hargeisa. That flow of money largely into Ethiopia yeah, that drain, but also the social and health issues associated with the cat economy. And we had this really, as part of the research, we had this really interesting workshop where we had the anti-cat movement, so a mix of men and women who were against cat, and then cat traders in the room together, and we were just discussing the nature of the problem, and they collectively recognised the challenges, its importance to the economy, and it's an integral part of society, but also the challenges that we're talking about here. And it's just something we need to think about for the future. Right, so moving forward, I'm nearly there. The last point is to reflect that I've given you a very quick whistle-stop tour of what happened during conflict and after conflict. The research is there. You've got a synopsis of the contemporary challenges, which Eid will also talk to later. But actually, in none of the other cities we've looked in has the trajectory of development, of achievement of peace, of achievement of peaceful democratic elections, with changes in government, yeah, we've not seen that in any of the other case study countries. Yeah, and that's been done through a self-help process. So we're really strongly advocating that the world looks in on how that was achieved. How if you don't treat peace and economic development as a project, yeah, as a project to be achieved, and you let that be led by local people, that actually good things happen. Following our work, there is, and I say our work, we did the research, and then Eid Ali Ahmed is continually knocking the door and talking with officials to ensure that the informal economy, that 70% of a relatively poor population, are having their work planned for. And that's what's happening now. And finally, perhaps the most important thing is, I'm here, I'm the voice in Cardiff, but that's because the workers can't be here. Yeah, informal economy worker voices at the heart of what's happening. The voices of some of the poorest in Hargeisa are at the heart of what's happening. They've organised themselves following the research, and they've been given a platform through which to be heard. So that's a really, really positive step forward. Diolch yn fawr, Mhad Sanid. Thank you very much.
I think, yeah, everyone in this room understands half-term and how busy everyone can be, so no one will begrudge you for that. Next, I'll be introducing the leader of the council, Hugh Thomas. And just before I do that, I just want to mention a few things in regards to, in 2015, Cardiff Council became the second local authority in the UK to recognise Somaliland at a meeting in City Hall following the footsteps of Sheffield Council. The motion proposed by Labour councillor Linda Fawn called on the council to represent concerns of the city's vast Somaliland community at Welsh and UK government and Commonwealth level. So next I'll introduce the leader, Hugh Thomas.
Well, good evening, noswaith dda. Gai ddechrau trwy ddymuno dydd Gwyl Dewi Sant. Hapus iawn I chi. Can I start by wishing you all a very happy St. David's Day? And maybe it's appropriate as we are celebrating our patron saint day in Wales that we are also holding an event of a very important part of the Cardiff community. I'm talking, of course, about the Somaliland community. And thank you very much for inviting me here to speak tonight. I'm delighted to be able to come and repeat and reiterate the council, Cardiff Council's support for the work that the Somaliland community does in the city and for your campaign for an independent Somaliland. The theme of tonight's event is the past, the present and the future. And we heard in that presentation about how as a country, Somaliland went through a very harrowing experience through the Civil War and has emerged through that experience with some positive experiences as well. And so from the past to the present, where perhaps there are some things Wales can learn from the Somaliland experience as well. We talk, one of the buzzwords in Wales at the moment is the foundational economy, and I think perhaps some of what you were talking about in terms of the informal economy certainly speaks to that. And then we also look to the future with the presentation tonight of the research into the informal trade economy, but also the future of the continuing campaign to gain recognition as an independent state. And as I said, we are proud to support that fight. As a city and a seaport, Cardiff has a long-standing history and worldwide reputation for welcoming people from all over the world. Our global connections transformed Cardiff from really just a small village into a true capital, leading us, in fact, to be dubbed the birthplace of multiculturalism. Cardiff's economy was built on linking Wales to the world as the gateway between the coal mining in the valleys and the global marketplace for that coal. And Cardiff is, I'm pleased to say, and has always been an open, diverse and inclusive city. It's a culturally diverse city, and this can be seen in everything from the architecture of the city to the fact that today there are 100 languages spoken each day in Cardiff. And people from all over the world now living in Cardiff have contributed to the rich fabric of the city. And as Councillor Ibrahim was mentioning, the Somali community is the oldest Somali community in the UK and has played an active part in the city life since about the 1870s, when many Somalis came to Wales to work in the docks. We are proud of the Somaliland community, and long may that continue, and we are grateful to call you friends. So as a council, we have called on the UK and Welsh governments to recognise the Republic of Somaliland as a sovereign state, and we support the international recognition of the Republic of Somaliland as an independent state. Despite the changes in the UK's relationship with Europe, Cardiff therefore must remain an open, outward-looking and international city, standing by its old friends and looking to make new friendships as well. Our welcome is what we stand for as a city, irrespective of the challenges facing us in the coming months and years. I want to make clear as leader, people from all nationalities, whatever their creed, whatever their race, whatever their religion, will always be welcome here in the capital city of Wales. It's quite a serious speech, so I just want to finish on a slightly lighter note, because this is also a community event, and nothing brings communities together like sport, and in particular football. And the Somaliland 11 are in action again this year in Cardiff Community's Cohesion Cup, which will be culminating in finals in May at the Cardiff City Stadium. So let's hope for a similar results as the last time we played in 2016, when the Somaliland 11 beat the South Wales Police Select 11 in a match played in the Principality Stadium. So I wish you well against the police. Thank you very much, guys. Have a successful night tonight, and all the very best in the future. Dydd go ddewi dda, hapus iawn. Happy St David's Day.
Thank you, Leader Hugh Thomas, for that, and thank you for reiterating in Cardiff's support for Somaliland and its recognition. Okay, next we're going to move on to, we're going to hear from the Chief Constable of South Wales Police, Matt Dukes. Come on.
Noswaith dda, good evening all, and can I reiterate first the Council Leader's recognition of this important day, and happy St David's Day to you all. I won't refer back to that football match he's just mentioned. I'm sure we'll get a rematch in due course. It's really important to be here on St David's Day, actually, because I think it recognises nationhood, and I'm not going to say anything political about not nearly as political as the Council Leader would be, except to say this: I am truly proud to have been born somewhere else and consider myself very much adopted and Welsh, and I know that there are communities from around the world who feel the same, and so I am absolutely with you in that. As the Council Leaders also said, thinking of the past, the history of the Somali and Somalilander community here in Cardiff is long. It goes back to those days in the docks, but of course also to the first recorded mosque in Britain's history in Glynronda Street, going back to 1860. So I think we can really celebrate something there. I was not in Wales at the point of the Civil War. I was working somewhere else, and I was working in Sheffield, in fact, somewhere which has also got a large diaspora community, and I remember very well the receipt of refugees into Sheffield at that time, and the profound sense of trauma that the individuals, families and young people and many older people had experienced. That is present in a community now which we recognise, and of course those two parts of the community, those which stem from that migration in the 1990s, and those that go back a century are present in the 10,000 people of Somali or Somalilander origin who are here in Cardiff now. It's important to be here tonight as well to recognise that it's 20 years since the Macpherson report was published into the events that followed the murder of Stephen Lawrence in London. A lot has been done in the years in between, not just by the Metropolitan Police, but by police forces across England and Wales to recognise the change that needed to happen. But we are not the diverse police service here in South Wales that our community deserves. And so where in Cardiff you will see, we'll see what the next census brings, this number will be bigger than it stands today, but where you see communities across South Wales that are 7% black and minority ethnic, and in Cardiff 12 or 13%, we have a workforce which is only 3% black and minority ethnic, and we have to do better at that.
Next, we're going to move on to a panel of community members who will be calling up their names, and they'll be joining us on a panel here. So Hassan Mahmood, Abdirahman Ibrahim, Faisal Isa, and Abdirahman Ahmed.
Country is geographically located in a very strategic position of World Trade paths destined to East Africa, the Middle East, the Indian subcontinent, and the Far East. All these ships load from Europe, from the United States East Coast, and they come through the Suez Canal and the strategic Bab el-Mandeb. That is where Somaliland is located. It can be argued that because of this strategic location, the British government at the time chose to give protection to Somaliland in 1884, thereafter known as the Somaliland British Protectorate. Therefore, I will speak briefly from the period of 1884 to 1991, and thereafter my colleagues will take from there. I will try to be brief but informative. During this period, Somaliland had its ups and downs. The protection period extended from 1884 to June 1960, except for a brief period of about 6 months when the Italians overran Somaliland, and that was in 1940. At that time, about 7,000 British officials and civilians were evacuated to Aden. The British and the Somaliland forces drove out the Italians in March 1941 during Operation Appearance. It is worth noting that in this war, Somaliland forces, which I can claim that my late father was a sergeant, were fighting alongside the British Army, while the Somalis in the south were in the same trench with the Mussolini forces. Mogadishu at that time was in the wrong camp. The period after the World War II was a time when what was known as the winds of change were blowing over Africa. Somaliland was no exception. In April 1960, the Legislative Council of British Somaliland passed a resolution requesting independence, and in May 1960, the British government stated that it was prepared to grant independence to the then Somaliland Protectorate. On June 26, 1960, Her Majesty's government granted independence to the Somaliland state. Immediately, 35 nations, including the 5 permanent Security Council members, recognized the Somaliland state as a sovereign nation. However, unfortunately, this fanfare did not last long. Our fathers, who were very much interested in pursuing the dream of great Somali state, encompassing all the 5 territories inhabited by ethnic Somalis, went into an unholy marriage with the South, with Mogadishu, which was a trust territory by the United Nations under Italian administration on the 1st of June 1960 to form the Somali Republic. And that's why I was saying that from that day on, the Somaliland name, the Somaliland territory, was sort of wiped out from the map. And it was only a figure 7, which was named Somalia, which came into being. At this point, I want to clarify 2 points. It was representatives from Somaliland who had discussions with representatives from Somalia prior to attaining the independence on June 26. It was agreed that an act of union, and that is the important part of what I'm saying. It was agreed that an act of union was to be signed by both parties, and that this document to be in the future of an international agreement between 2 states. The Legislative Assembly of the Independent State of Somaliland signed the act on the 27th of June in 1960, but it was never signed by the representatives of Somalia. Instead, the legislative members of Somalia met on the 30th of June 1960 to approve in principle an act of union in Italian language. That act of union was significantly different from the one signed by Somaliland. This act of union was never ratified, and it was never enacted into law. And they still claim that we are part of that union. It was never ratified, neither ratified nor enacted into law. In 1961, there were young graduates from Sandhurst College, officers from Sandhurst College in here, who, when they saw the problems that was facing the fledgling Somaliland nation, they tried to rectify things. But the government at the time saw that these people were engaged in a coup d'etat, and they were all arrested and imprisoned and accused of high treason. However, the case fell apart when a British judge ruled that the union was not valid at all, and the union between Somalia and Somaliland was not valid, and they were acquitted and released. The worst scenario came starting in 1969, when the Somali army seized power and adopted scientific socialism, which was the Soviet communism in disguise. The Somali people, particularly those in the north, could not digest this as everything was nationalized, and people were subjected to harsh means of living.
Testimony of his time of the events. Come forward, man.
Thank you very much for being here. As it is the 37th anniversary of the Ragaxtur uprising against the government of Cllr, I want to give a testimony of what happened during the uprising. I was a student at that time in February 1982. I was a student at Sheikh Bashir High School in Burao. I was 14 years old. That school was built by the British when they were there. It was a women's girls' school at the beginning. But later on, it became, both sexes students attended that school. I was 14 years old in the second year of the high school, in February 1982. The process against it, or as it's called, Ragaxtur, or stone throwing protest by the students and their teachers, started in Borough in February 1982, when the UFA group was wrongly and unjustly convicted and given the lengthy jail sentence for helping their people. As my friend Hassan mentioned, that this UFA group, which Eid was a member, was a social justice and self-help group of volunteers who, even though they were established in Hargeisa, they are a large following all over Somaliland because of the good work they're doing. So when the people find out, and the students and the teachers find out what happened to them, even though they were not political, even though they were not a political group, but volunteers were helping the people in working in the hospitals and all these, people realized that they have to do something about it. So people march in the streets and they organized a protest against the regime, for children and sentence, given long jail sentence for those people. At that time, it was it was in February 1982, when the protest started early in the morning, and the government, because of the tension, they were, tipped off or notified of that protest organized by students and teachers. So they were, all the security, police, operators, everything was in place. So that was contained, and a lot of students were actually arrested and taken them to the military barracks, Burra military barracks. And so that protest, because they were aware of that's taking place, they were contained and stopped there, and a lot of students were released 2 days later because they were trying to calm the situation down. But that was the first one. The second protest started in May, 1st of May, under the guise of May Day celebrations. To give you some background, the May Day celebrations were traditionally used by the government as a vehicle to promote the regime. However, the teachers and the students plan to hijack this and to protest against the detention and the torture of this UFA group. So the protest started on the 1st of May and it caught the regime by surprise, because this time they were not aware that there's a protest taking place against the government. So the process lasted for 3 days, from the 1st of May till 3rd of May, and a lot of thousands of students and teachers were arrested and put in the detention centers. When the prisoners get filled, they took a lot of students to the military barracks in Ber, which is a town 20 miles south of Borough, and then my group, I was arrested in the morning of the 2nd of May 1982, and taken to the Borough military barracks with hundreds of my fellow students, all rounded up for taking part in the protest. Can I also mention some of the teachers and students who were leading this protest? Some of them are, as far as I know, are alive, like Abdi Haj Hassan, Abdi Askari, Amir Sichue, and one of the students who were leading that protest was Harir Haibe Gagali, and he's dead now, Allah yarhamu. When we were taken to the military barracks of Bora, and we were confronted by General Ghani.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very glad to speak about the Somaliland past and present. My name is Faisal Isa, and I'm one of the students who took part in the uprising against Mohammed Syed Ibrahim's regime, 1982. To be honest with you, that was a sad moment to talk about it. As we are all aware, Mohammed Syed Ibrahim was a cruel dictator president who marginalized the whole entire population of Somaliland. Our people have been killed, tortured, and the most of our intellectuals and our academic have been imprisoned. If you are especially from a particular tribe or a businessman, You have been watched, and if there is any suspicion, without a proof, you'll be killed or you'll be arrested or jailed. Most of our cities in Somaliland were under curfew around 24 hours at a time. Education was limited. And if you want to go to university, there was none. You have to go to the south. Somaliland was like a Guantanamo Bay, and Mohammed Syed Ibrahim done many crimes. He killed innocent people. He destroyed all cities and belongings. The country is still suffering after a long time independence from the south. Somaliland really needs help from international communities. And I can't really, it was like the uprising in the Arab countries. We were throwing stones 7 days a week, for the whole week. And they were fighting like soldiers. They were shooting us lively. And some of us were killed, some of us were tortured, some of us were in prison. There was food, a couple of days no food, and was no water, and it was really suffering, and we had a difficult life. And still, the world forgot us in Somaliland. What we asked was recognition to help the other Somali communities back home, as you were watching with Ethan and the other professor. So thank you very much, and I hope it will change the life of Somaliland soon in the future.
Is it Broda or Nasda, Mr. Alan Michael? Nasda or Broda? Because I'm learning Welsh. Galab wanaagsan dhammaantiin aad iyo aad baan idin salaamayaa dabeedna inta dambe waxaan ku hadli doonaa Ingiriisi. We have heard two powerful testimonials, and Hassan already mentioned the background of Somaliland history, and I don't want to depress you anymore after hearing all these powerful testimonials from two students at the time. But I would like to raise our hopes. My part is how Somaliland people recovered from the carnage that happened during that period. In a major gathering on May the 18th, 1991, the North unanimously voided and invalid the so-called Act of Union that Mr. Hassan mentioned, and established the Republic of Somaliland, rebirth of Somaliland, because Somaliland was existed since 1884 up until 1960, before we merged with Somalia. We haven't merged with a country called Somali Republic, Somalia, but we merged with a country called Somali Republic. That's what we formed. Somaliland Republic and Somalia form a country called Somali Republic, which does not exist at the moment. A lot of people are not aware of that. Somalia exists at the moment, but Somali Republic, which we form, does not exist nowadays. It collapsed, and central government collapsed, and then they are called now TFG, Transitional Government, and Transitional Government Somaliland was a part of it since 1991. We consider ourselves Somalilanders as a state which was the former British Somaliland Protectorate, which gained independence at that time. And after 80 years, we made a mistake. And that mistake haunted us. And up to today, the south part is called Somalia, is still claiming that we are part of them. Technically, we're not part of them. We have nothing to do with them. Since 1991, Somaliland adopted a hybrid form of multi-party democracy, which uses Western parliamentary democracy with traditional laws and customs. This unique form of government was strengthened the legislative houses of elders and all other mechanisms that we built, where the clan elders used to diffuse tensions among northern communities. This distinct form of democracy has survived up until today due to the grassroots bottom-up approach deployed by Somaliland. In contrast with Somalia, underwent countless transitional governments since 1991 with immense assistance from the international community. However, analysts believe this attempt failed because of a lack of ownership in the process, which Somaliland achieved due to a lack of external assistance. In 2001, Somaliland's constitutional referendum on its independence led to 97% of the population opting for independence. Somaliland is known as beacon of peace and stability, also known as the one of Africa's most efficient in terms of pastoral politics, and has had elections since the mid-1990s. Well before it was, before Nigeria established the democracy. I will actually refer to a few points. One is political development, which I've already touched upon. There is a Somali saying which says, "Penale markhatigu su fogeya," which means the liar or the lying person chooses a remote person as a witness. That's a Somali saying. Here is today a witness which will witness and which will reaffirm later what I have just said. Steve is here, our MP Stephen Doughty is here. He's been to Somaliland. He saw what's happening nowadays in his own eyes. So as Alan Michael before him, a while ago. And I hope a lot more visitors will follow. The truth of the matter is Somaliland has achieved no political recognition yet, apart from the de facto recognition from Ethiopia and Djibouti, because they actually deal with us as a government. The Mogadishu lays claim to Somaliland despite exercising.
Okay, could I take the opportunity in thanking Hassan Mohammed, our panelist, Abdurrahman Ibrahim, Faisal Isa, and Abdurrahman M. Dodi. Thank you so much for your personal insight in the story of the struggle of Somaliland. Sorry, my name's Nazir Adam. I'll be taking over the second part of the event. But also, one thing I'd like to say is that Somaliland would not be where it is today if it wasn't for the struggle of those young people with their resilience and their bravery that took on the might of Syed Ibrahim. So I'd really like to congratulate all them young people who are with us today, to really thank them for making Somaliland what it is today. But also those who, in terms of Cardiff and South Wales, in terms of our elders who have really been part of that struggle as well, who really supported Somaliland, both financially and in terms of resources. So we really like to thank our own elders and our forefathers. So basically, and I'd like to thank Eid Ali Salam as well and the other rest of the committee who've organised this tremendous event in this beautiful hall. It's quite ironic that it's called the Temple of Peace, and it's really celebrating the peace aspect of Somaliland. Could I bring on Eid Ali Salam to really give us his research in terms of the entrepreneurial spirit of the Somaliland people and their resilience. So I'd like to welcome Eid Ali Salam to the stage.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all attending this meeting. In fact, we organized this within a very short period. And we thank you all those who attended this meeting. And the reason was that we were doing this, conference or meeting, and tiling that with the the Dagaxtuur, which is a national day. That's the throwing stones, which was on the 20th. Then, there are some gaps, as you see, but I think it's okay, to convey what we want to say about Somaliland. The past has been talked about, the panel. Also, the recovery also has been discussed. Now what I'm going to do is, I was part of this research. I think we started this about 9 years ago, and I was trying to convince Cardiff University, where I used to teach, that my colleagues to go to Somaliland and to do this research. It took us about 10 years, this to come through. We started this 2016, and we were there August 2016. There were about 3 of us from Cardiff University, and there were another external consultant. We were 4 of us, and we had partners who were working with us, as Dr. Bita was saying, and that's Girls University, and also SONSOF. SONSOF is the civil society umbrella organization for Somaliland, which is very, very effective. This research is the first empirical academic research that has been done about Somaliland. You find out, you can Google. It is the first academic research that has been done, and it's true. I mean, why I'm saying that is the truth about it. We have some reports, also done in Somaliland, but I'm talking independent academic research done by academicians of Somaliland. If we go to this presentation, I don't want to talk much about, the conflict. That has been said, how it happened, and that's the context, key events, causes of conflict, impacts of the conflict, key places of the conflict. All these has been discussed through. Therefore, I don't want to dwell on it. Next one, please. If we look here, I think Hassan and the panel, they were talking about the history of Somaliland. This is in short. When you start from 1960, we can go through, and it's all showing the different dates, about what happened about Somaliland, up to 1991. Therefore, all these, 4 lines contains the history of Somalia, what has been through. I don't want to go through it, but I will share this presentation with anybody who wants. Causes of the conflict, if you go back. Causes of conflict. It is domination of Somalia and marginalization of Somalia. It has been said, I don't want to dwell on it. Then if we look, say, Hargeisa group, UFO, I think, where's Abdurrahman? Abdurrahman, he was very young, but I was one of the troublemakers. I one of the who created that UFO, and we were the troublemakers. And we have that testimony by Faisal and by Abdurrahman, who were in the schools at that time and who were throwing the stones. That's the history. I think what's good about this UFO is now the Commissioner of Human Rights of Somaliland, appointed by the President, is one of them. He was sentenced for a year, for a life, Mohammed Baroud. And now he's the Human Rights Commissioner. That's the good about it. Mohammed Haji Mahmoud, he's in the parliament. He's a member of the parliament. Therefore, that whoever, came through that 1960, 1980, is still they are functioning. There are many, many of them who are functioning and doing a good job. Like Dr. Mohammed Abakar, he was head of the hospital at that time, and he was the chair and the director of many NGOs. Yeah, Doctor. I don't want to go dwell on this. If you come to the next one, impacts of conflict. It has been taught. It has been said. That's atrocities. All these troubles that has been. Then we come to the key places. All the cities were destroyed. Then second one. If you go to I think now what we're going to has been said is the destruction. This is Hargeisa or any city in Somaliland like that. Now people coming back, they are trying to rebuild their life. If you see that lady, she's trying to sell milk. That's what she's doing. And in this, struggle we have been through, and Dr. Peter talked about it, is the backbone were the women. Men were doing the fighting, and the women were doing the living. They were doing the business. This is the spirit and the entrepreneurship of the Somaliland people. While the war going on, the business was all going on. Our refugees, they were not depending on handout from the international community. They were working, and they were selling gold, even in the refugee camps, Tul'at, all this. That's how we survived, because the amount of aid we were getting for our refugees at that time was very minor. But people were working, and the diaspora were helping, from Cardiff, from London, from everywhere. That's our strength. Let's go. This is the destruction, okay? Here, over 300 Somalis or Somalilanders fleeing civil war across the border. And you see people who had decent life, now they are the desert of nowhere. And they are relying on this. This is what the people have been through, in practical way. Second one, please. Yeah. This is the study, highlights. In many cities, sub-Saharan African policy marginalizes the urban informal economy, and the informal economy workers are often victimized and harassed. This is a study done by comparing with other informal economies in the world, particularly in the sub-Saharan. And they get a lot of harassment in the sub-Saharan. That's what Dr. Peter was saying as well. If we look here, in Somaliland, it's completely different. In contrast, there is very little police harassment. Our police, they don't do that much harassment, to these informal traders. They do some, but when you compare to the world, it is not that much. Furthermore, there highlights levels of trust and cooperation among informal workers and the society, and the regulated environment which all enables and encourages growth, free enterprise, and the entrepreneurial spirit of Somaliland people. If we go at the end, here, as been through, this is the money selling. I think Dr. Peter also showed that. This is amazing. That's the Somali shilling exchanging with the dollar. And it is true that when they go to pray, they leave, this money in the street. Colleagues from Cardiff University, when they saw this, they said, is there somebody behind them who is taking a cut from them and looking after them? No, it is a social contract. Nobody is going to touch that money. Nobody. It's true. Therefore, when you go to the center of Hargeisa or Bur'o or Borama, you can see the money exchange over there, and nobody going to loot it. There is no thief. If anybody tries to loot or do a theft, the community will catch him. It's true. Yeah. Second one, amazing. This is life back. You see that lady, she came from refugee camps, and now she's working and she's a tailor. She's happy and she's making her earnings. This is what we are, Somalilanders. This is the true spirit of the entrepreneurship. Yes, here is the milk, and this is the camel milk. It's very, very. And this lady, she gets up in the 4 o'clock in the morning because she has to get her supply, and she has worked all the day, and maybe 8 o'clock in the evening, she's going home. And she's selling that. That's how she's earning her mainly delicious camel milk in every street. Second, this is the narcotic cat. Yeah. In fact, if we say how much we spend on that, when we talk about the practicality, and you look the balance of payments of Ethiopia government, the coffee was the major earning item for Ethiopia. It was coffee. Today is the cat coming to Somaliland. At least about $700 million goes from Somaliland. Every day, I think $3 million goes from Hargeisa, Bur'o to Ethiopia. And that's why the money exchange gets high. In the evening, when it comes about 6 o'clock, that supplier of cat, he needs that $1, therefore he can buy that $1 any amount he wants. And that's how the rate, rises. And this is a problem for us, Second, thousands of voters queue to vote. This is the presidential election. How peaceful? Because where there is no peace or safety, there will not be any development. That's true. And this is how you see that, even that queue, nobody touching, no harassment, nothing. People are voting what they want and they're doing it. This is, the characteristics of the Somali people. Since 1991, we had changed 5 presidents. And thanks God. Okay, next one. This is our mainstay. This is what we export, animals. And this is Berbera. And this is our, gold. We don't have any oil, we don't have any much factories, but this is what we have, the Somali. Here we call, I think my colleague, he was talking about Gobernimo. This is, where most of the informal traders, they do their business. Now they are selling this in the street. The government is building this building for them now. And that's a plus, but when you see they are over there in the street, but after a time they will go to that building, and still it's going on. Change of government. The new government, as 13th November, is committed to give more emphasis on local production, strategically aiming import substitution, particularly fishery and agricultural products. Before, we didn't have that policy, but now this policy is on the strategic plan. And the new government saying 30% of the budget has to go to development. It's a fact. I'm involved in the strategic plan. I'm one of the people and authors of that strategic plan 5 years. And this is good policy, because if you look fishery, our tuna fish, where it comes from? Our tuna fish, it comes from Thailand. And what's very strange is that ships, they took the tuna from our sea, and they took to Thailand, and they put in the tins, and then it comes back and they sell to us. This is true. Yeah. Therefore, this has to be changed, because our merchants or our business people, they can build factories in Somaliland. That's what I'm advocating. They have to build factories in Somaliland, rather important, and they can do it. It's not that expensive, to put a factory of, a factory of fishing. If you put it, it's not that much. I don't think it will be more than $2 million. It can be easily built. Therefore, it is not right. This policy has to be changed. The Ministry of Agriculture giving more support to local farmers and allowing more farms and land in Togo-Chad. We have a fertile land which can be the Ministry of Finance increased the development compound. I talk about that. That's 30% of the development. Gobernimo traders are more organized. They don't have a voice, the informal traders. But what we are creating now is cooperative for them. And I think if you look, in the findings of the research, it is written there that cooperatives to be created. And we will try to make a connection with the institutions here in UK, particularly in Wales, because the cooperative, movement in Wales suits our needs, and that's what we are trying to tie up with. This is the stage. If you look at that's a small, medium, money policy, and this policy is drafted and needs of IE traders are taken in consideration. The policy will be validated and implemented in the near future. I'd like to say that policy has been approved. Now, it's a law. Before, the informal traders, they were not part of the system. They were invisible. They were not part of the 5-year strategic plan. This is very important. And they make GMBG 75%. 75% of our gross national product is from informal traders. And they were not part of the strategic plan. But because of this research we did, we campaigned that informal trade to be included in the strategic plan. I'm glad, that the government approved that, and now it is part of the policy of the economic sector of the national development. That's the informal trade. That means the World Bank, the United Nations, every international institution will look now the informal traders' needs because it's part of the policy. And that's a plus, that's an achievement. I think if I, summarize all this, what I like to say is, whatever that has been written in that strategic plan, most of the strategic plan items or recommendations has been progressive. And what is important is those, recommendations are tied up to the National Development Plan. That's very important. Therefore, this research done by Cardiff, it's extremely important. And what we are saying is, if the government follows that strategic plan recommendations, which they approved, many recommendations that we put to them, if they go through that, within 5 years, the economy of Somaliland will completely change. Yeah, that's our prediction, that's the way we see it. I don't want to dwell more on that, but all I'm saying is, this research, the first academic research, the government welcome it, and if we look now, this is me, and that's Professor Allison from Cardiff University. That's we making presentation in last November to the ministerial meeting. The Minister of Trade was there, the Minister of Finance was there, the Minister of, Minister of Interior was there. Who is who? The central bank, director, governor was there. That's what we were doing and selling about the recommendation of the report. Second, this is the discussion chaired by the Minister of Trade, Tourism and Industries. If you look, that's the minister, and the person, that lady, sitting near to him, she's a Danish, and she's from Danida. Danida is one of the agencies that supports Somaliland a lot. This is, we are celebrating, and this is the minister there, and all the people involved there, and we are glad that research is approved, and now the recommendation is accepted, and we hope the progress we talk about. The other thing I'd like to highlight is, whatever written in that strategic plan is a public document. That's put in the website of the National Ministry of Planning, and now what we are looking, how to convince the international community to look at those recommendations and to fund them. That's our strategic plan. And this informal economy is part of it. Thank you very much.
Eid Ali Salam, Adbo Masantai, Jazakallah. Right, we're going to the second panel discussion now. Welcome the Right Honourable Alan Michael to the stage and to the panel. Matt Jakes. Stephen Doughty, the Right Honourable for Cardiff South and Penarth. Martin Shipman. Martin, yeah, they are. Okay, Shipton, yeah, they are. Thank you. Councillor Ali Ahmed? No? No. Could I get Abdikarim then to take his place in the panel discussion then as well? Abdikarim? And could I get Eid Ali Salam as well to come in on panel? No?
I think at this stage, I'm not sure what we're going to do, but it'll prove interesting, I'm sure. This evening has been fascinating to me because we've heard from people about things that affected some Somalilanders and had a big impact on our city of Cardiff. Because, of course, the period of the war, it was described as the hidden war because it wasn't seen by the international community, was a period when there was a big influx of Somalilanders into Cardiff, men and women. And of course, before then, the Somaliland population in Cardiff, which had been here since the middle of the 19th century, had been largely men, seafarers who came and went. And it was for the first time that we saw the influx of women and children building up to the population, the large population of Somali residents that we have in Cardiff. Those people have contributed over that, 170, 180 years in many, many ways, to the seafaring, to the export of coal from Cardiff, to the steelworks, some of the fabrication works, manufacturing, many, many ways in which that contribution has been made. So there are two parallel histories: the history of Somalilanders, the Welsh Somalis in Cardiff, and the history of what has happened to Somaliland. It's been a big challenge because from that moment, when there was effectively the defeat of Syed Ibrahim and the breakup of Somalia in the south as a result, there have been significant problems in the Horn of Africa. And we hear again, we've heard tonight, the plea for recognition of Somaliland. Now, there are not many places that have seen the passage democratically from one president to another on, I think it's 5 occasions. There are not many countries in Africa, not many in many parts of the world, that have had that degree of stability, of recognizing the importance of accepting votes that take place. That's not always easy. Stephen and I have been in situations where we've lost a vote and lost government, and it's not a comfortable place to be, but it's a sign of a mature democracy to be able to handle that. The problem, I think, is that when Somaliland wanted to regain the independence that it had briefly at the end of Britain's rule, if you like, many countries, particularly in Africa, were afraid that others would follow the same path, that the Ethiopian province would want to leave Ethiopia, that part of northern Kenya would want to move, but also much more complex situations in many, many countries in Africa led to fears on the part of the African Union that recognition of Somaliland would open up all sorts of possibilities elsewhere. We know that the Deputy Chairman of the African Union had written a report on the future recommending that Somaliland be recognised. But that report was never put before the African Union because of those fears of precedence. I know what the logic is. The logic is to say the precedent would only be for a country to be recognised if it had exercised independent democracy for 25 years on its own. There wouldn't be many that would follow that precedent. But it's not that that always dictates the way that international decisions are taken. Stephen knows far more about those from a practical point of view than I do. But I know from the discussions we had with the African Union when I led a delegation to Somaliland, discussion with then President Meles in Ethiopia, that there were many who said, we have respect for what Somaliland has done, but somebody else needs to recognise them first. And that is still the problem that faces Somaliland. It is amazing that the country has been both so stable and so successful given the lack of that international recognition. The only lesson I think we can take out of it is the one that Iri Ali Ahmed is offering us today, and that is the entrepreneurial spirit and the capacity of Somalilanders to be independent-minded, to continue to develop their own solutions to their problems. And it's that, of course, that has won them respect around the world, even if that respect is sometimes grudging. I'm not quite sure what this final session is meant to do. I think it's for us to offer some opinions. My opinion is that Somaliland needs to value what it's achieved over the years and consolidate that, both in terms of business, international links, however they can be achieved, to recognise that even without international recognition, whether by the United Nations, the African Union, Somaliland is respected in the way that many countries that are recognised are not respected. And that respect is probably the most important characteristic that you should value. And the final thing I would say is that you should build on the values. We were talking about cooperation. Wales has a tradition of cooperative endeavours, and I think there are lessons to be learned about how to do things in a cooperative environment, which is different to the top-down structures that happen elsewhere. It seems to me, and I picked up on the term that was used, danwydag. Yeah, it sounds almost like a Welsh word, actually. The sharing the same interests, building on that capacity to do things together is probably more important than the structures and the support of international structures. So perhaps our own Wales Cooperative Centre can work with you in the way that that develops. And cooperation works somewhere else as well. I just want to say this in closing. One of the things we've been talking about is helping the police in Somaliland to develop their professionalism, to understand the policing in the community, and of course the trust that is there is probably different to many other countries internationally, so there is a basis for that. Matt Jukes, the Chief Constable, said earlier, we want to see people from all our communities, including the Somali community, joining the police so that our police force reflects standards and reflects the communities that are policed. We also set out our aspirations in the Police and Crime Plan. And I'm going to give 2 copies of this to Eid Ali Ahmed, one for himself and one to convey to the police authorities in Somaliland, because it spells out the ways we try to do things here, and I hope that we'll be able to work with you to help the police service in Somaliland to continue to develop and to be able to share and exchange views and experiences in order to help that to build with the cooperative ethos, the ethos of policing in the community, with the consent of the community, and with early intervention to prevent bad things happening rather than only responding to bad things. That's another aspect of cooperation which is different to the economic one, but I also think it is particularly important. Thank you very much.
Just to clarify from what Alan and Michael were saying, basically the panel is just to have your contribution first for a couple of minutes, and then we'll go into a panel discussion, question and answers, and hopefully that should clarify in terms of the panellists. Can I call the Right Honourable Stephen Doughty for Cardiff South and Penarth?
Thank you very much. For those who don't know me, I'm Stephen Doughty. I'm the MP for Cardiff South and Penarth, but more importantly, for tonight's purposes, I'm also the Secretary of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Somaliland in the UK Parliament, which is an incredible group. Alan was instrumental in its operations over many, many years, which brings together members of the House of Commons, members of the House of Lords, and of all parties. And very importantly, we work with all parties in Somaliland and all parts of society, with civil society, with government, with women women's organisations, with youth organisations, and as part of that, it was a real privilege, really, an honour to be able to travel out recently to Hargeisa as part of a delegation, the first official one from the all-party group. I think since Alan went 10 years previously, there have been other visits, of course, but it was a very significant moment that we had rekindled some of those connections and some of those links. And I thought, given that the focus has been on sort of past, present and future, I'd focus very much on the present and the future, because I was very lucky when I was elected, really, that I had so many fantastic people from the Somaliland Welsh community who were able to share with me some of that history, some of that cultural history, the legal history, the constitutional history, and of course the incredible relationship between our city and Somaliland, but also actually the links with the other parts of the UK. And I think one of the things that those of you, well, I'm sure many in the room have been to Hargeisa and have travelled in Somaliland, but is that you constantly come across people who go, oh, I lived in Sheffield, or I lived in Liverpool, or I lived in London, or I lived in Cardiff, I lived in Bristol, and people whose connections are so intimate, are so present, are so real today. This isn't something in people's past, it's what's happening today. And having travelled around the rest of Africa and a lot around the rest of the world, I have to say the connection between Somaliland and communities here is one of the most dynamic and day-to-day I've seen of any diaspora communities, in terms of people feeling their strong connections in both places and living, working, trading, educating, being involved in both places and seeing the cooperation that can exist between our two countries. And I think that's one of the most fantastic things about Somaliland. And Eid, Abdi, and many others in the room today are perfect examples of that. People who are contributing hugely to community here in Wales and in South Wales, but also in Somaliland. And I think that's a wonderful thing. So just a few reflections on what I found about Somaliland's present in my visit, and some about the future. I think one of the things is, and I think for anybody who hasn't travelled to Africa before, hasn't travelled to the Horn of Africa, a lot of myths about what it will be like and how difficult it will be and the problems and so on. And I just say from my own experience, think of some of the practicalities. There was better Wi-Fi connection in Hargeisa than I get in the House of Parliament, okay? I had fantastic food. I had a wonderful welcome. I met inspiring young people. I visited the University of Hargeisa. I visited the cultural centre. I met with ministries that were doing incredible things with that entrepreneurial spirit, despite not having recognition. I saw incredible plans for business and for trade. I saw the fact when we met with the Electoral Commission, the way that Somaliland, and we've talked about the democratic process here this evening, but the way that Somaliland is leading the way actually in safe and secure elections. They're using iris technology and fingerprint technology and things that we don't even use here in the UK to ensure the validity of their elections. And actually, when we talk about democracy being under threat and those seeking to undermine it, incredible that is going on in Somaliland, which isn't even recognised. Incredible. So many things which would be surprising, I think, to some outside. And of course, we always hear about the security problems. Well, there of course are challenges, but the reality is that Somaliland hasn't seen a major attack or incident since 2008. I felt welcome, I felt safe. I would urge anybody who wants to travel out to Somaliland to be able to go and do that, and be able to go and learn and build those connections, and not follow the somehow I don't want to rain on the Foreign Office, but sometimes they're very restrictive advice about what you can and can't do, which I think has been a real problem at times. So very much it felt to me that Somaliland was open for partnership, for business, for trade, for connections, and it was a really fantastic visit, and I can't wait to go back another time. And again, those trade connections with both the Middle East and with neighbouring countries, the fact you have now the regular flights and the connections with Ethiopian Airways and Fly Dubai and others, it's easy to get to Somaliland, it's easy to make those connections. It's only so many hours from the UK, and that, given the historical, cultural and incredible connections that we already have, should mean that there is so much more potential for partnership in the future. But of course I saw some challenges as well, and the fact that unfortunately, because of some of the challenges that we've seen south in Somalia and in other areas, the fact that Somaliland still has to spend so much of its national budget on security, on policing and so on, instead of perhaps being able to spend more that it would like to on health and education and other development projects. It's fantastic they've been able to do that, but also shows the real challenges that are there. Secondly, the fact that the sort of limbo that not being recognised puts Somaliland in. I didn't see any influence of Somalia there at all. You know, this idea, you know, that they have some sort of influence over what goes on in Berber or whatever else, it's not there. But the reality is that people face difficulties because they are associated with Somalia, and whether that's in terms of passports or visas or trade or contracts or other negotiations, those provide real challenges. And we met with business people and others who say that recognition, of course, would be absolutely crucial to them being able to flourish and go forward. And I think thirdly, there has been huge progress in civil society and human rights and the place of women in Somaliland society, but there is still a lot more to do. And I met with some of the fantastic women's organisations in Somaliland and youth organisations who told me that they want to see more women in politics. They want to see more places, guaranteed places in politics for women in the parliament. They wanted to see the laws passed on sexual violence that thankfully the parliament is now taking forward. So we must recognise there's been a lot of progress, but there are still many, many challenges to go forward. And particularly meeting young people there, it was very clear to me not only how educated and ambitious they are, but also how unfortunately the many challenges they face, whether it's the lack of recognition.
Sorry, due to the limited amount of time that we have available, could I just ask Martin Shipman and Abdi Karim, Martin, if we could just go into the questions then afterwards, of course you spoke, and yeah, I'm just a bit worried about the timing that we've got here. Martin Shipman, thank you. Shipton, sorry.
Thank you very much. A few reflections from a journalist, coming from a slightly different perspective from our friends here, politicians, and Alan now being the Police and Crime Commissioner. As you can imagine, and I'm sure this applies to most other journalists as well, frequently get approached by individuals who have something which they want publicised. In the main, these are people who have got a very particular interest of their own in a particular subject. There may be some issue relating to a miscarriage of justice which affects them or a member of their family. They may be in a situation where they have been treated badly by an electric company, for example. But in the main, we are talking about situations where people have got some kind of personal problem. Now, about 15 years ago, I was contacted by a gentleman sitting in the front row there, known to everyone here, Eid Ali Ahmed. And he wanted to talk to me about the subject which we know he is an expert in, Somaliland. And I, at the time, had a vague idea about Somaliland. I've taken interest in international politics for many years, since I was a teenager. So I was aware of the breakaway nature of Somaliland, but I didn't really know very much about it. I wasn't really clear about how things were. And Eid explained the situation to me in some detail. I became aware that he had been involved in the uprising, which led to Syed Ibrahim being overthrown. And I then learnt more about the civil war which ensued. But what was different about the approach that I had from Eid was that this wasn't somebody who was coming with a personal problem to talk about. It was somebody who was actually representing a nation and who was passionate about wanting this nation to prosper, to be recognized internationally, and to move forward. And he clearly wanted me to understand how important it was, not just for him, but also for many other people living in Wales, and particularly in Cardiff, that this nation, which hadn't been accorded international recognition, was something which was bound in very deeply with the history of Cardiff, and which deserved to get attention, and that there was a national injustice here which deserved to be rectified. So I found that very impressive because it was something a little out of the ordinary. I mean, obviously we've got politicians in Wales, some of whom are nationalists who want to push their particular line. But here we had somebody who was actually representing a nation that in a sense was yet to be. Although it was functioning as a democracy as we know, it was yet to be internationally recognized. Now then, over the years, from time to time, he's been in touch again when there have been visitors from Somaliland who've come to Cardiff and have met, obviously, members of the community here, but have been here in order to further the links with Wales. And I remember one of the earliest occasions when he'd contacted me was about the opening of the Senedd, which took place, the new building that was built in the bay. And one of the people on the guest list of the Senedd, the opening of the Senedd, was the Speaker of the Somaliland Parliament. And it was quite a remarkable thing for a quite new democracy like Wales to be in a position where it decided to invite the Speaker of a parliament that was functioning from a country which is approximately the same size as Wales in terms of population, but which didn't have international recognition. And I think it was a very good and commendable thing that the presiding officer at the time, David Ellis-Thomas, decided that it was a good idea to invite the Speaker of the Somaliland Parliament. And I interviewed Mr. Abdullahi when he came to Cardiff, and he was able to give me personal testimony about what Somaliland was wanting. Again, there was this constant issue about the lack of recognition. We were being told about the way in which democracy was developing, that the economy was moving forward, but that there were immense problems because at that time there weren't any banks, because international banks would not go there because they couldn't get any insurance. And he was making these points to me that I found were very telling. Then a couple of years after that, he'd contacted me in the wake of what was, as it turns out, the last or the most recent terrorist attack that occurred in Hargeisa, and he was actually over there when it happened. He gave me testimony about the very loud bangs that were heard by him, and he briefed me on the political situation that had led to that. Now, clearly what had happened was that there were members of the youth Al-Shabaab terrorist organization in Somalia who wanted to disrupt this developing democracy of Somaliland. And so they decided to undertake this terrorist attack, which actually killed more than 20 Somalilanders. The intention was to assassinate the president. One of his close aides was actually killed, and I remember Eid telling me at the time that he'd had lunch with him just a few days before, and that he was a very nice, friendly guy. And I could tell at the time that Eid was very upset about what had happened. But what he was able to do at the time was to get me a telephone interview with the president. And of course, we're talking about a time when it must have been an enormously shocking state of affairs in Somaliland, because the country was seeking to establish itself as a stable country in a region where, as we all know, there is a lot of chaos and mayhem. And to be in a situation where there had been a terrorist attack in Somaliland was a very difficult situation. But what impressed me was that the president, despite the difficulty of the situation, and it would have been so easy not to engage with a journalist from Britain, was very happy to be interviewed by me. And so I rang him, spoke to him in his office. He was extremely frank about the attack that had taken place, about what the motivation was of the terrorists who undertook it. And he was very anxious to get across the fact that the security generally speaking, was very good in Somaliland, but on this occasion there had been a breach, and I know that he was very keen that something like that should not happen again, and indeed it hasn't. Now, subsequently, I was also very impressed when he told me, a little while later, or a couple of years later, you remember that president that you spoke to on the phone? And I said, well, yes, of course. And he said, well, he lost the election, but there was no trouble at all. It was absolutely fine. And the guy who beat him has just taken office, and everything is absolutely fine. There's no problem. How many countries does that happen in Africa? It's very unusual, and indeed in many other parts of the world, where when somebody is defeated in an election, the usual thing is for them to say that the election was rigged, even when they've been an incumbent and they're extremely unpopular, and they will seek to cling on to power. Now, it just made it absolutely clear to me that all the claims that had been made to me and all the assertions that had been made to me about the fact that this was a functioning democracy were in fact true, because it was demonstrated that when somebody was defeated in an election, they just moved out of the presidential, I hesitate to say palace, I can't imagine it is a palace, but move out of the presidential office and let somebody else take over, and to have a transition that is perfectly peaceful. This is something that in a democracy like Britain or any European democracy, we should cherish and we should applaud and say this is wonderful, and we should be prepared to help a country like that, which demonstrates that it is able to function in a proper democratic manner. And then over the years as well, and indeed very recently, a couple of weeks ago, I met some more senior officials who come over from Somaliland. And I have to say, I'm always very impressed by these people. They're intelligent people, they understand the nature of governance, they speak like civilized people, which they clearly are, and they deserve to be totally commended. Somaliland, the people of Somaliland, in their quest for recognition, and I hope that it comes amazingly soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin Shipton. Can I just get Abdikrim to quickly say a few words, and then, because I'm just really worried of pushing time now. Abdikrim.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May I take this opportunity to express deep appreciation on behalf of the government of Somaliland, on behalf of the President and the Council of Ministers and Parliament, for the work Cardiff have done. It's a homegrown democracy. That homegrown democracy, whether it's in Cardiff or in Hargeisa and rest of Somaliland, is exactly the same. Back in 1987, Alan was running for candidate. It was a time of changeover from a previous MP who was confident to a new MP. And Ed and I and others have worked with Alan. We have collected so many signatures for Alan to become Member of Parliament. I never knew that Alan ran so fast. What happened, 11 o'clock, those 800 or whatever names we collected would have been lost. So we ran together to actually deposit the list of those names we collected. And thankfully, we made it on time. Then the regrettable, nasty civil war have started. Somaliland, homes, villages, cities were destroyed to the ground. Again, the call for democracy is very simple. We knew one thing: go and speak to our member of parliament. We made the call on behalf of the community. The community elders, many of them, some of them have died, some of them are alive, have come together in one room. We asked Alan to give us weapons so we could go and fight in Somaliland. You would remember, Alan said one thing: collect the names of all the Somaliland MPs in the United Kingdom, and I'll give you something more than what you are asking for. We give you democracy. We collected all the names and we phoned around. We gave Alan, and that was the first time the Somaliland All-Party Parliamentary Group was established. We went to House of Commons, and Neil Kinnock have arranged for the French bench, Foreign Affairs spokesman and the African spokesman to come. We held an interview, the BBC. Syed Ibrahim said, "Oh, is Cardiff? What's happening in Cardiff? You know, where did this come from? How many educated? How many this?" But this democracy, homegrown, wasn't just for the elders. It was a lot of young ladies who had participated in that demonstration. Syed Ibrahim abdi marka imika waa hooyooyin waa kuwa dhimid jooga Zainab iyo Bushra ayaa ka mid ah oo maalintaa halkaa ka hadlayay. Those was the girls who were actually with us, were demonstrating. So this movement of Somaliland, both in Somaliland and in Cardiff and in Wales, it was all cultures. Sarah Hayes and many who had participated. Amnesty International, Lorraine Barrett, who was Alan Michael PA. When we made the call, she was there. All I want to say, we recognize your contribution. Cardiff is recognized more than any city because of you, the community, and their member of parliament. Alan has wrote a report. The homegrown democracy is available, and I could share it with you when he went 10 years ago. Steve, I had a privilege to welcome him in Somaliland like Eid. We were present at the airport. He gave an eloquent statement. They were told not to go this way, but there is something in the House of Commons. It's called constituency. Because I was a member of the constituency, Steve went shackled though off the record. He was able to speak to me and speak to it direct. Again, that shows your contribution. If you do not work with your member of parliament and others, those sort of things would not happen. Somaliland has lots of achievements to shout. At the same time, there's a lot of challenge. On this next stage in our democracy, we need every single of you to train your kids, to train yourself, and come home. What is now being led, Eid Ali Ahmed worked at the Ministry of Interior. Myself, I work in the Ministry of Constitutional and Parliamentary Affairs. Ahmed Hassan Arwo, Director General of the Bank of Somaliland. Syed Sulaiman, Director of Development of the Ministry of Health. Musa Hassan, Head of the Standard for Somaliland Quality Standards. Cardiff is making a contribution in Somaliland as well as here. You need, all of you, to respond to what the Chief Constable is saying. Your contribution here reflects over there. What you do here is really your achievements, is is done in there. What we want you and we want the police is start, nurturing from nursery. Start nurturing from, primary schools, secondary schools. Let's work together the way we worked in the past, where we could get a Somaliland police cadet, be a member of the South Wales Police Cadet. We want police, for example, the fire service. The fire service is now donating equipment, and we appreciate it. We need the ambulance service to work. We need all the public services for Somalilanders and the community here to participate as equal. You have a right to participate. What Mohammed, for example, Mohammed Adan, he worked in the housing department. When he started, there was no single person working in the housing. And thank goodness we have the managers, we have the frontline workers working in the housing association and others. That's community development. All of them that's been done. So what I appeal to you in Cardiff, men, women, young, old, help us to build a country that is already success in Africa. Without you, we cannot achieve it. And the president simply called me Cardiff. Honestly, when we were coming here in November with the delegation, he never looked at, why we're going to Cardiff. He simply signed off. And that's the respect you have gained in Somaliland. And I really, take my heart for you. Please support and recognize your qualities, the qualities you have here, and the standards that is built. Transfer those skills. Those skills you could now do easy over the internet. Every sector is needed, more so in terms of the informal economy, which he's talking about. There are a lot of skills, register those skills. And lastly, I want to take this opportunity also to express my appreciation to the committee who organized, Hassan Mahmoud, Eid Ali Sanan, Abdurrahman Dodi, Faisal, and the others, and the women and everybody who helped me. Thank you very much. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, Abdulkareem. Okay, we're coming to the end stages of...
واتهي حبله عاومات halkan ka qayb galay ayaan halkan kula kulmay magaciidina balarta ii sheega
magacaygu waa Khadra Cardiffna waan deganahay barnaamijka ma sha Allah ka soo qayb galay si fiican buu dhacay Somaliland darkana aad iyo aad baan u salaamay magacaaga
dalmar aniga magacaygu waa Barnamuj Taarikhda ma sha Allah barnaamij qiimo la caawan oo dhacay oo i xasuusiyay waqti aad u dheer sababtoo ah waxaan ahaa dalmar oo kamid ahaa dhagax turkii ardaydii ku jirtay 82kii marka caawo de xusuus baan idhi ayaa maxaan ku dhadaan kala kulmay meesha
maxaa sababay reer Cardiff in ay uga badan yihiin xagga dhaqdhaqaaqa dalkii yani wadankii ugu dhaqdhaqaaq badan yihiin qolyaha kale ee UK
wallahi waxaan u maleynayaa dalmarow Cardiff waxay ahayd horta meelihii ugu horeeyay ee yimaadaan odayadii Somaliland ee siimanada ahaa waa sababta horta ugu horeysa ee ay uga dhaqdhaqaaq badan tahay Cardiff waxay had iyo jeer ka gashaa number 1 sida aad sheegtay Europe oo dhanba ama UK ba annaguna halkii la nagaga tagay ee la noo dhiibay baanu ka haynaa ma sha Allah waxaan aad u salaamayaa dhammaan reer Somaliland oo hadda ka soo maqanay waqti ku dhow sanad campaignkii waxaan ka mid ahaa gudidii campaignka gobolka Gabiley dhammaan inta muuqayga iyo magacayga taqaan madaxweynuhu ugu horeeyo iyo madaxweyne ku xigeenka iyo dhammaan saddexda qole ciidamada iyo dhammaan shacabka reer Somaliland dhanba waa salaamaya aad iyo aad baan maadsanahay aad badal mar waxa tahay qof fiican qiimo leh wariyaasha starka ayaa tahay iyadoon jirin TV qaran ayaanu ka daawan jirnay internetka
thank you Amina aadna sidoo kale aad baan ku salaamay aad baan daawadayaal waxa noo sii socda waraysiyadeennii koobnaa aan ka qaadaynay bal dadweynaha halkan ka qayb galay laba eray caawa ka waran kulankii halkan ka dhacay
wallahi si fiican buu u dhacay dad badan baa isku yimi magaalada Cardiff oo dhan way joogtay ninkan muhiimka ugu wuxuu ahaa Michael oo ka qayb galay anagu waxay ahayd 88 sideetanadii demonstrationku ma isku soo raacinay alla meekal uu imanayay demonstrationka lagu sameynayay magaalada Cardiff marka wallahi si wacan bi xafladan caawa u dhacday ya aad baa u masantay dalmar
daawadaashada qiimaha iyo qaayaha leh halka waxa noogu dhamaaday barnaamijkeeni gaarka ahaa ee aan ka soo sameynay magaalada Cardiff ee gobolka Wales halkaas oo ay Somaliland dalka halkan ku soo bandhigeen barnaamij aad u qiimo badan barnaamijkan ayaa gabi ahaantiisba wuxuu daarnaa in loo mahad celiyo dadkii halgankan muddada dheer soo socday ka qayb qaatay oo runtii u badnaa dad cadaan oo degan gobolkan Wales iyo guud ahaanba wadamada UK waa dalmar oo idin leh sidaa iyo nabadgelyo wassalaamu calaykum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakaatuh